Let me move on and ask you about a previously hidden connection between the non-voting delegate Stacey Plaskett, who represents the Virgin Islands ostensibly. She doesn't talk much about the Virgin Islands or the people who reside there. She talks instead about things that will get her on MSNBC, but technically she represents the people of the Virgin Islands in this non-voting capacity. So Stacey Plaskett on the one hand and Jeffrey Epstein on the other. You had a June 27th article on your Substack entitled "House Democrat Worked for Epstein's Tax and Political Fixer. Court filings reveal that the delegate Stacey Plaskett misled the public about her deep ties to the powerful pedophile." What deep ties did Stacey Plaskett have to the powerful pedophile that she misled the public from knowing about?
Well, this revelation came from an ongoing litigation between J.P. Morgan and the Virgin Islands government. Both parties accused one another of facilitating and enabling Jeffrey Epstein's criminal enterprise of human trafficking, of aiding and abetting and abusing young women. In some of these latest filings from J.P. Morgan, actually, they show that Jeffrey Epstein controlled a fairly powerful political machine within the Virgin Islands. He donated to and gave various enticements to local officials in the Virgin Islands so that he would basically accomplish a few things. One, to silence critics. Two, he also wanted a special carve-out from the sex offender law so he could travel in and out of the Virgin Islands without any disclosure requirements. And three, he was looking for massive tax subsidies. He received basically $300 million in special tax exemptions for his business, and for which he seemed to lie about. He claimed that he had a biotech startup, but there's no evidence of that. Now, those documents show that one of his biggest allies in the Virgin Islands was actually Stacey Plaskett. Plaskett, when she was running for office in 2014, was running in the Democratic primary against a major Epstein critic. So Epstein's closest advisors told him, hey, we've got to intervene in this primary. We got to silence this person who's been publicly criticizing you. We got to get Stacey Plaskett in. She's an ally. I should note, as Stacey Plaskett has basically defended government censorship and discussed the supposed evils of misinformation and disinformation, she's gotten some critical facts wrong here. When she was asked by the Virgin Islands affiliate of NPR if she was aware of any of these connections to Jeffrey Epstein, her many donations that she received from Epstein, she said no, she didn't know about them. She learned about them in the media. Well, these documents from the litigation tell a very different story. She actually met Epstein early when she was running for office. She solicited him many times directly for his campaign. Epstein donated not just directly to her, but to a Democratic Party affiliate of her campaign. And then later, late in Epstein's life, just not long before he was arrested for the second time and brought to New York, Stacey Plaskett went to Epstein's house in New York, met with him, and asked for a $30,000 donation to the Democratic Central Committee for House Democrats. That's a very large donation. That's a special contribution to a party committee. So she was meeting with him in the Virgin Islands, meeting with him in person, constantly soliciting him. And what maybe one of the biggest revelations from these documents is that how did she get connected to the Epstein kind of political machinery? Well, before she ran for Congress, something that she scrubbed from her LinkedIn, she worked for Jeffrey Epstein's closest tax accountant and political fixer, someone named Erica Keller-Halls, who's still the attorney for Epstein's estate. That was her job, working for Jeffrey Epstein's personal lobbyist and tax accountant. That's who Stacey Plaskett worked for before she ran. So she has deep and intimate ties, not just to Jeffrey Epstein, but his small and kind of insular team of lawyers and tax accountants.
So as somebody who has worked with Lee as a colleague for many years and who has been familiar with his journalism for many years before that, I want to hasten to add that there's nothing Lee ever says that isn't substantiated by all sorts of documentation which you can go and read because he furnishes that documentation. That's what his reporting always is based on documents he unearths, and then it's just very kind of straightforward descriptions of what it is that we can reveal. So that article is up on his Substack. It's from June 27th, I think I said. And so, yeah, June 27th. And so everything that he just described about these connections between Stacey Plaskett on the one hand, Jeffrey Epstein on the other, the interventions she did in order to help him be able to travel more easily despite his sex crime history and the like, the financial ties are all visible through the documents that Lee obtained and then published. Lee, let me ask you about another part of this reporting you've been doing about Jeffrey Epstein from some of these emails that emerged from the litigation. Central to Jeffrey Epstein's financing was JP Morgan Chase. They have, I think, had been sued many times by his victims. There have been internal reports about some of the reckless things they did in providing financing to him or staying connected to him. And one of the obvious questions that people have always wondered about, and I don't think we've ever really gotten an answer to, is it's very easy in the United States, not necessarily easy, but not that hard, to get very rich. But the level of wealth that Jeffrey Epstein had wasn't just rich. I mean, the fact that he was able to do things like travel on private planes and buy, immense private islands and build everything he built there and own multi-story townhouses in the most expensive real estate in Manhattan and then in West Palm Beach as well, was a level of wealth that never really has been explained. I mean, he did have connections to a couple of billionaires who really seemed to value whatever he was providing them, and certainly a lot of it came from there. But there's always been the question of whether he had connections to any particular nation states. Of course, there's been suspicions about his connection to the U.S. security state, about to Israeli intelligence, whether his involvement in a lot of powerful people enabled him a kind of blackmail that was valuable to these governments. None of that has ever been proven, but you did unearth an email that suggests that he had specific ties between one of the most important people at JP Morgan Chase and also a former Israeli prime minister. What did that email demonstrate? There, we put it on the screen, but go ahead and describe it.
Well, in a new batch of emails that were released this week in this ongoing litigation, it really shows greater detail about why JP Morgan had this close relationship with Epstein. It seems very clear from these emails that Epstein was a fixer. He generated income for his associates and potentially for himself by connecting high-level people. In this particular email that you're highlighting, he's connecting JP Morgan executives, potentially even Jamie Dimon, although we don't know if the meeting took place, with Ehud Barak, the former prime minister of Israel. There are other emails showing attempted connections to Bibi Netanyahu, the former and now current prime minister of Israel. Really, it's fascinating because you look at this balance sheet that was actually disclosed this week. It shows that the private banker assigned to Epstein was the most profitable private banker in their kind of upper echelons of private bankers at JP Morgan, because in part, Epstein was a connector. He connected these private high net worth value bankers to people like Bill Gates, to Sergey Brin, the co-founder of Google. He facilitated high level meetings with famous journalists like David Gergen, with other kind of celebrities and other political VIPs. By connecting people, he appeared to be generating revenue for financial institutions like JP Morgan, who wanted the business of these billionaires and very wealthy individuals. So we still don't have the full picture of how Epstein generated his wealth. There are, I think, very kind of serious allegations that he used blackmail and other forms of pressure to extract donations or revenue from certain wealthy individuals. We still don't know that full picture of that, but what these documents do show from JP Morgan is that he was basically an incredible source of referring business to the bank. They could bankers like James Stanley, who eventually became CEO of Barclays Bank, but when he was at JP Morgan, he was this banker, Mr. Stanley, was assigned directly to Epstein, and he used Epstein to bring in these billionaires and high net worth value clients into JP Morgan.
Let me ask you, Lee, and again, I really encourage people to go to look at some of these connections between Jeffrey Epstein and a lot of powerful people, I sometimes dislike the reactionary attempt to immediately assume that anybody connected to Jeffrey Epstein is participating in his pedophile ring. There's a lot of other reasons to be connected to Jeffrey Epstein. Besides that, he, as Lee said, had a ton of money, was able to facilitate connections. At the very least, though, everybody knew about this conviction for cavorting with underage girls, and it didn't really seem to bother really anybody in the highest levels of power, as he continued to be able to move in these circles with incredible ease. And I still think there's a lot we haven't learned on purpose about exactly who it was that Epstein influenced, who helped him, who financed him, who received favors from him, because it's in so many people's interest and so many institutions' interest to keep those connections hidden. So Lee's reporting on that is really worth taking a look at. Thanks for watching this clip from System Update, our live show that airs every Monday through Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on Rumble. You can catch the full nightly shows live or view the backlog of episodes for free on our Rumble page. You can also find full episodes the morning after they air across all major podcasting platforms, including Spotify and Apple. All the information you need is linked below. We hope to see you there.